had already been through armament school and gunnery school, and I was there, and we took off. I flew with Captain Grundy, who was one of the original crew members, and we did phase training there and got orientated. It's the first time I'd been on a B-17. I sort of liked the bird. It grows on you. Then we went from there on over to Lakeland, finished our more detailed training there, and went on over to Georgia and took off for Italy. That was our assignment. Everybody flew Central and South America, over to Africa, up to Algiers, Casablanca, and I was just a young guy, and that was rather exciting to be in Africa and Casablanca, and over to Algiers. Algiers, we had some time down, and I got in with a couple free French soldiers. I had 2 years of high school French. I could write it, they could read it. They could write it, and I could read it, but I had no dialect to talk to. And this is, I always thought was a fallacy in some of our school system. But anyhow, we got along good, and then we got on over to Italy. When we first got into Foggia, the crews flew with other groups that were there for a while just to get orientated what was going on. Finally, we got to our own base it was just a cornfield, and they were still shoveling the wrecked German aircraft off the end of it so we'd get the other planes in and land. We started flying our regular missions. First one was just up and across the Adriatic to Yugoslavia, just a short orientation type thing, but it was, we found out then that the Germans had one ACAC gun on one truck, and they ran it up and down the mountain range in Yugoslavia. So as soon as we took off, we had to get through the clouds, get some altitude, or we lost an aircraft to that one German ACAC gun. We got more orientated, started getting longer missions. I was on the Plesty raid. That was the first big raid from Florida. First big raid for our group. And
how many planes were lost on that mission? Do you remember?
that's a tough question, because when you're in the middle of them, you don't always look out. What happened was we were a lead group that day. There was a recall, and all the other bomber groups turned back. The fighter escort turned back, and the clouds opened up. We didn't get the recall. Whether our radio man was asleep or what, we didn't get the recall. Clouds opened up. We looked down. There's close to oil fields. We made our bombing run, and when we came out of the flak after, which looked like one big black cloud, at the other end was 100 and some Goering's yellow-nosed fighters, and we got engaged in a real air battle for everybody, and we hollered Mayday, Mayday, and the P-38s, which were our escorts, heard it, and they turned around and come back in time to break up the fighters. But we had heavy losses that day. I don't want to say exactly how many, because I don't know where they ever reported how many. But it took us a few days after that to get regrouped, and we started flying again. I was on my 45th mission. I already had my suitcase packed to come home. It was 45. My original crew when new crews were assigned, they took an established crew and put some of the new crews on board to get orientated to what was going on. And I was a stand down that day, and my crew got shot down over Pulaski again. And so I got assigned another crew, and we took off flying again from there. And on that crew, John Sant, who was here, I don't know if he's been interviewed or not, but John was our co-pilot. And we were going to Blackhammer, which was one of the first long rays into Germany itself from Italy. And we got attacked. New German Messerschmitts hit us head on. I think we got knocked out of formation. We lost an engine, and we're pulling out to get out of the fighting area. And the radio man was hit in the leg. Got up there and tied an arming wire from the bombing rack around his leg, threw him out the bomb bay and told him, hey, when you get down below freezing, you know, be sure to open that up a little bit so you don't bleed to death. And I went back, I checked the tail gun, our crew back, and he had been shot through the head, so as I was coming back up to my position, which was left to waist, I looked out and I saw 3 Ju-88s. The Germans had taken the Ju-88s, which was a well-established fighter for them, fighter bomber, and they had armed them with 2 and 3 37mm cannons. And what they did was, when a plane got knocked out of formation, and the slower Ju-88s come in and finish them off. So I just I saw them from the waist, from the tail gunner's position. So I went back to my job and waited. Instead of our normal procedure was to fire at them at 1,000 yards, which kept them out of the rest of the bombers. But I just left my gun hang there till they got in close. When I saw them, peeked over and I saw them, I raised my gun up, opened up on them, and then they went underneath our bomber, and they were attacking from the left there. The reader, the radio ball turret guy says, Bill, you got 2 of them, and you knocked some parts off the 3rd one. And so that made me feel good. Then the order came back, we had to bail out. So we got a reader out of the ball turret, and I went back, and I bailed out. We got hit, the ME2s, they came in head on like this. And if you got hit in the engines or what, usually you slowed up, you fell out of the formation. And then they didn't come back. They had set up the system where they let the other fighters, slower fighters come in, either F-109s or FW-190s come in and finish fighting the planes that were knocked out. But then they took these Ju-88s, which was still slower than the 109s or F-190s, and they had put 3 37mm cannons on the front of them, and they were deadly. You know, they could throw out a wall of fire that would take anything out in front of them. So they were a real threat to what was going on. Yeah, we lost an engine right away and had to get out of formation. And then there was, I think, another pass at us, shot up some more of the plane. That's when the radio man got hit and the tail gunner got hit. And we had, you don't think about time, you just do what you have to do and get ready to get out. Finally, the Lindblom phone called back and said, we're gonna have to abandon it because another engine went out and the fuel was leaking out. They said we're gonna have to bail out, salvo and bail out. They salvoed the bomb so that it didn't become a bomb itself when it hit over the friendly territory. We were spread across Yugoslavia, and the pilots saw, we had to salvo the bombs before we blew up, we were on fire, and he saw that there's a big Gothic German church there, and it was like the church they had in town here on our tour, that big, fabulous, ancient, and we went around it and salvoed the bombs out in the field. Well, the Czech people were watching from the ground. They could see the contrails and what was going on. They were considered us as freedom fighters because they were an occupied country, and they were grateful that we didn't bomb their church. And the plane crashed, and the rest of us were spread out, and the Germans saw us. They were watching us come down too. And I evaded for part of a day. I was my leg was beat up, and I couldn't get away too fast, but I got out of my little suit and took off towards the hills. Intelligence people told us the people in the mountainous areas were more apt to be friendly than the people in the ground business area. So I headed for the mountains, but I had to stop and watch. There was a field with people working, so I stopped and waited for a minute, and finally I heard click, click, and I turned around, and here's a Czech conscript. The Germans had 6 young Czechs as conscripted into their army to work for them or starve, and the rifle looked about that big around. Anyhow, I didn't have any choice but to surrender, and they finished up taking off my flying clothes. There was one German officer and 2 damn biggest police dogs I've ever seen in my life with him, and the 6 Czech soldiers. So I sat down on this, they put me on a tree stump, and he said, "Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" And of course, at that time I didn't know what it was. I said, "I am Staff Sergeant Wainwright." Wham! He knocked me off, picked me up, set me down. He said, "Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" And I said, "That's wham!" He knocked me off. But the 3rd time, one of the young Czech soldiers whispered 9, 9 in my ear, so they set me up there. He said, "Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" I said, 9. And that satisfied him. That satisfied the German officer that I didn't speak German. I had to tell him in German that I didn't speak German. And I thought, boy, if this is the intelligence of these people that captured me, I'm in bad shape. Anyhow, we got back and regrouped, got us all in one jailhouse, so to speak. But on the way back to that group, the young Czech soldiers, the German went so far back that he took off with these dogs in another direction. And they took me back to this, the mayor's office. The mayor of the town wanted to meet me, and he thanked me. He spoke a little broken English, thanked me for not bombing the church, and asked me if there's anything he could do. I had some blood on. He said, "You need some Band-Aids." He said, "All I have is Band-Aids." I said, "No, I'll get by." And he introduced me to the chief of police who was there. Then they took me, he said, "We got to do this. We have to turn you into where we were told to." So they took me back to this building, big sort of 3-story building, 2-story brick building, with swastika banners hanging down the side of the swastikas on, and machine gun nest at the bottom of it, and I said, well, I guess I'm really at the end of my line as far as the war goes. And then I went under German patrol from there. There we went from up to Frankfurt to the interrogation center. He said, who are you? I said, I'm Staff Sergeant Reader Roberts. According to the Geneva Convention. He said, yeah, Geneva Convention. And they took me out, and I spent 7 days in solitary. And you never knew whether it was daylight getting dark or dark getting daylight. They took you out twice a day to go to the head. Then at the end of about 7 days, they took me back. He said, who are you? I said, I'm Staff Sergeant William Robert. He said, that's a joke. He said, you're a member of the 463rd, you're at Foggia. He said, Major Toll was your squadron commander, and I thought, hey, they're not very smart. Toll's only a captain. But time I got, after I was shot down in that 10 days or so, Toll had got promoted, and they knew it. German intelligence, they knew it. But anyhow, he said, you're no threat, so you're going to Stalag Luft 4. And we went to one following us, we got some change of clothes and so forth there. Then we were packed on a boxcar and sent up to Stalag Luft 4. About a 4-day ride in a train. We had packed in this 40 and 8 like you see in the movies. We were packed in there. You couldn't lay down, you couldn't stand up. We sort of, there was one hole in the floor in the corner. We took turns rotating around. By the time you got back there, it was time you could take a leak out the hole, you know. So anyhow, we were in Berlin, and there was an air raid. And all the German guards were on top of the car and other cars. They all ran over and got in bomb shelters, and we were sitting there in the middle of Berlin marshalling yards, and the planes were bombing us, but they missed their target that day, thank goodness. And then a day later or so, we got back up where Stalag Luft 4 was. 4 was up in Poland, and they had a crazy captain up there. At the time, how I found what it was, the people that took us on the train said, for so many cigarettes, we will escort you up to the Stalag Luft 4, a mile or so up the road. If not, we'll just tell them you're here. And they didn't explain why, but some of the out of the original Red Cross parcel we got when we were back at the interrogation center, we all pitched in some cigarettes, and he said, okay, and they marched us up to Stalag Luft 4. When we got there, here comes this captain, German captain with red hair out, just raising all kind of raising noise and carrying and swearing on, because we had got to the camp. His joy was running the people from the prison train up to the camp who had been on the train for weeks sometimes and stiff and couldn't move, running them up the hill with the dogs and bayoneting them if they fell out of the formation. But we got into the camp, and the Stalag Luft 4 was fairly new. They hadn't built, we were in a logger, they were still working on the other loggers or areas on the other side of the road. And in the camp they had a big tent, like a circus tent, and we were all running there. And I got in that group, and they were hollering, hey Bill, and I turned around, and it was a crew that I had been staying with after my original crew got shut down. I had moved in with them, and we bunked in all together in a big tent. and they were all glad to see me. They got shot down after I did, but they had got there before I did. I found out then that Emerson Toll had been promoted to major. So that verified that, not in my mind, I thought, well, that's something to remember. Life was there. They built an area next door, sea logger, which we finally got moved over to and got our own wooden barracks. But I got in with a young Polish guy from Buffalo, New York. See, I grew up in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, New Middletown, and we could speak a little Polish, a little Russian, a little German, anything, because all the mill workers kept their own tongue, but all of us kids went to school together, and we'd pick up phrases and things. And Stanley was from Buffalo, and his parents were Polish, but their Polish wasn't Polish. It was what the Americanized version. But he and I could stand at the end of the barracks, and they had, at the other end of the barracks was an open pit latrine, and the Germans used a super duper Scheisenscooper, which was a tank with a carbide cannon on, which created a vacuum, which sucked up the waste. And this Germans took a full colonel, Russian colonel, to run that wagon. They demoted him to running that wagon. But Stan and I found out we could sort of yak at him a little bit, and he could tell us it was pretty broken and that we could communicate the days he was there. He told us about the air raids going on, and then what Stan and I did, since you couldn't form a group of more than 6 men anywhere out in the area, we would go around to each barracks, and the men could all congregate there. We gave them the intelligence report for the day, what was going on. And that's how we kept current what was happening. At night, the Germans, when we got moved over to sea logger, then the barracks were built up on stilts. And the Germans came along at night, they had microphones and dogs, and they would listen to what we were talking about. Man, they liked details. And so we would have a guard where they had a peephole to look in our barracks. He would peep out to the barracks across, and when he could see the Germans, would pass a cigarette or a flare, something, so that they knew the Germans were there. And we started, when they were underneath our barracks, they would tell them about our new 6-engine bomber and 32 machine guns, and just all sorts of fabulous things, and they're down there listening. And when I said, how do you know anybody's down there? I said, Herr Schickelgruber, which was Hitler's real name, but you couldn't use his real name. I said, Herr Schickelgruber's probably eating a big meal tonight. Das ist verboten, das ist verboten. You can't say that. And they were beating on the barracks, and so we couldn't say anything, but we proved that they were down there listening to us. I guess I was a bit of a rabble-rouser with the people. No, we took buckets, just sort of bucket. They had built a shower-type room, but there was never any water connected to it. Things were primitive.
How did you, where'd you get water from?
That we had a pond, a fire pond in the middle of the compound. The barracks were built around it, and that was in case of fire. There was water there to put them out, so it just didn't burn down. And we'd scoop water out of there and take a shower every now and bath with it. They could smuggle an egg in, you know, and trade it for cigarettes. Cigarettes was money. I didn't smoke. When I was about 11, 12 years old, my grandmother gave me $50, and she said, "This is yours if you don't smoke till you're 16. By the time I was 16, I was busy doing other stuff. I never did smoke cigarettes. So the cigarettes I got was cash.
Those cigarettes came in on the Red Cross pack?
Yeah, there was cigarettes in the Red Cross one. Chesterfields and Lucky Strikes. Well, in the morning we got a bucket of, big pitcher of hot water. The Red Cross food parcels were delivered intermittently. They were not on a steady basis. And if you had a Red Cross parcel, you had some instant coffee. Otherwise, you just drank hot water. The ersatz coffee, you drank that the Germans had. Ersatz being a name for that they applied to anything they made out of something else.
Right, it was artificial.
And noontime was nothing. In the evening, you got another pitcher of hot water and a bucket of boiled potatoes. This is for 24 men in a room. Or just a bucket of what we call grass soup. And we found out they just went along the roads and cut the weeds and stuff and brought it in, boiled it up. And occasionally you'd find a worm in there, and if a guy picked a worm out, you'd know he was new guy to camp. If he ate it, you knew he'd been there for a while. So we ate the grass soup. And we got a loaf of ersatz German bread, about this long, about this high. And a lot of people, I'll tell you how they divided it up. This is American ingenuity. We did have some Red Cross cards. So you took a deck of cards, you put ace, king, queen down, how many slices you needed for the 20 men. And then you took another suit of cards and you got a corresponding card. Because somebody thought once that a slice of bread was a little bigger or thicker than somebody else's, there was a fight. So we all agreed that you took the piece of bread that was on the card that you handled, and that was it. And that's how we avoided fights and divided bread up or anything up, was that system there.
Was that the bread? I've often heard that they had sawdust mixed in with it.
Yes, it was sawdust. And I proved that one day to myself. They finally, come middle of winter, we had a little tube type stove in the barracks, and they did give us some briquettes, and we had a fire in there, got it going. And I said, hey, I'm going to make me a piece of toast. I want some toast. I put my ersatz bread on there, and I turned around and the damn thing caught fire. It didn't toast. So I lost a slice of bread. I couldn't eat the charcoal. No, I did save the charcoal though for people that had diarrhea. And I told my buddy, I said, hey, I said these people are going to have to supply their own bread if they want charcoal, you know. But that's how I found out it did have sawdust in it. And then at the end of the compound was a potato cellar. They brought in kohlrabies and potatoes and things, stored them in there. Well, the season's on, so we'd had some to eat. And when they were building the compound across from us, we weren't supposed to gather in a group of more than, if it was more than 4 together, the Germans shot at you. So when you walked 2 or 3, but you never walked in 4. But it was about 6 or 8 of us sitting up on this potato cellar watching them build the compound next to us. And one of the people wiring it got the wires crossed, and he's up there being electrocuted, and we're going, yay! And the guard in the tire starts shooting at us with a machine gun. So I was still sitting there, and my buddy jumped up and went down the back, grabbed the back of my shirt, and pulled me way down the back of the potato saw. He never hit anybody, but it was an old World War I SPAD doing a bang, bang, and then caught bang, 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 but he was shooting at us, and then we all were re-lectured about gathering of more than 4 people gathering, and we couldn't demonstrate about anything. I shut down in July, got liberated in May, and just before we got moved out of the compound, went by. The German jet, that first German jet, was being tested up there in Poland. It flew over the camp, and we didn't know what it was. We had no idea what it was. And then later, there was another one went by, and there was a crash further in the woods and burned, but we learned by then that we all went in the barracks and cheered. We couldn't cheer outside. But in December, we knew the Russians were coming. And our camp commandant was a World War I Prussian officer. He only had one arm, but you walked in, he was at attention, you were at attention, you saluted him, he saluted you back, you said your business, and you left. Very military. And he decided to march us out. And in January, knee-deep snow, we loaded up wagons and marched out of Stalingrad back towards Stettin. An interesting side note here, I found out later, after the war was over, that Hitler had ordered the 5 POW camps up in Poland there, kill the prisoners and form a defense line against the Russians. One of our guards, who on the trip and I got friendly, by then I was a little better with my German and he was a little better with his English, talked. He was a retired college professor and recalled in the last call of the Wehrmacht, the land army, to guard prisoners. Well, Schultz and I, we got pretty friendly on this to talk. We talked about a lot of things. But their philosophy was that Americans and Germans should have been together fighting the Russians. That was the basic thinking of the German people. But when we found out later, like I said, Hitler ordered all those camps exterminated, it made me really grateful for Schultz and their thinking the way they did. But all the camps there finally got marched out. One of the bad days was Valentine's Day, February 14th. We covered, marched about 28 miles. You just got to remember, this is cold weather, and we just had on coats or sweaters or whatever we had. And the Germans issued you a blanket, so everybody buddied up, and you'd sleep on one blanket in the ground and cover up with the other one. They put us in this field at Stettin. We thought, well, my buddy said, hey, things can't get worse, you know. We were laying there, and I said, yes, they can. And it started to rain. And he said, what are you thinking about? And I said, this is Valentine's Day. You're supposed to give hearts and candy. And I said, the only thing I can think about is I'm gonna go home, and these people are gonna have to stay here and live in this damn mess that they have created. And then it stopped raining. Because some of us, J.D. Bennett from Midlothian, Texas, and a couple other people, we sort of formed a little a group of four, I should say. We sort of traded each other, helped each other, and one guy had a watch. We traded it off in one town for some bread and eggs and whatever we had, we traded. We worked off to help each other get through, you know, carry their money, help them down the road. It was, you just couldn't make it alone. It was not possible. A couple days after that, in the beginning of March, we were in a barnyard. See, on this march, we were just a group of men going down the road with a handful of Germans guarding us. We could have taken them over any time, but then we could hear the Panzer units fighting on one side and the battle going on the other side. We decided we better stay organized that way. But in end of April, the weather cleared, and we were all going down the road, and here comes a sound. I said, hey, that's a P-51. And sure enough, a recon plane flew over us, but everybody didn't know it was just a recon plane. So well, everybody ran and jumped in the ditch. So, and he fired a couple rounds just to threaten people and went back. So we said, if he comes back, we're going to do it different next time. We all agreed we'd stay on the road. So next day here, sure enough, here comes the P-51 recon down to see what's going on. We all stayed in the road. The German guards ran and jumped in the ditch, so he strafed the ditch. And we just stood in the road with our arms up, you know. So they realized and recognized we were a group of POWs. So he came over every day till we got, about a week later, we were in a barnyard, and a British tank came by. He said, about noon, he said, hey, Yanks, he said, you're free. 2 clicks down the road, or 2 kilometers, there's an aid station. They have fresh bread and some milk, but you're on your own to get there. And so he handed me his rifle. On the march, he handed me his rifle, and I told him to carry his own damn rifle or throw it away. But he handed me his rifle again, so I took the bayonet off and put it in my boot and took the rifle and wrapped it around the pole. And I had a pack of about 6 or 8 cigarettes, and I gave that to him. I said, take the insignia uniform and go home. I said, the war's over. You know, for both of us, the war's over. Just go home. I don't know if we ever got home or not, but we got to the British aid station. They took us down to a little town called Lunenburg. There in the middle of the street, we all stripped down, and the DDT people were there. They dusted us head to toe and issued us new uniforms and told us the nearest lift from there back to Lahar, Camp Lucky Strike. And sure enough, in a couple of days, we got in there and went back to Lucky Strike. And I thought, well, and the war's over at last. But you never know. We had one POW crawl into the mess tent in the middle of the night and ate a bunch of fried donuts. None of us had eaten anything fried for a year, and he died right there. He was dead. And the others, as we started eating a little fried food, turned, but the color of those French fries over there, a little yellow. And they loaded us up, getting ready to get on the ship. We were on the ship to come back on. And that morning, man, I turned ill too. And the people that had jaundice, they were putting them in the hospital. and flying them to England. And I told my buddy, I said, hell, I'm not going to England. And I said, I had one in front of me, I held on to him, the one behind me shoved me. And we got up the gangplank, and there the ship's steward was assigning people to different, where they were going to sleep. He looked at me, he said, you go to sick bay. So I went to sick bay, and they put me, I was in the ship's hospital all the way back. And, we docked at Boston, and then went on, got off at Boston. We got put on a train to Atlanta to Miami. And finally I decided, well, I guess the war is really over. But we got off, the troop train was in Atlanta. And in Atlanta they had a lot of Italian prisoners and some German prisoners. And they were walking around all dressed up in white clothes and talking to the girls and wandering around. And my buddy, Ken Master, it just, one bumped him. And he acted like Kenny should apologize to him. And Kenny reached down and picked up a tree stump. They had some new trees with stakes on them. He grabbed that stake up and whacked him alongside it. And the whistles were blowing and the people were rattling, and they got us around. We went over and got on our own troop train. They came through the troop train. We were all just sitting there, you know. We don't know what, but we don't know anything about that. We got on down to Florida. We got to Florida. I finally told Kenny, I said, hey, Kenny and I were friends then because he was from McKeesport, in the same town. And I said, Kenny, I said, I think we're really going to get home this time. So sure enough, we did get leave out of there to go home for 60 days. But when I got home, all the neighbors and everybody wanted to feed you, you know. I weighed about 138 pounds when I got home. I was pretty skinny. But I couldn't eat. I couldn't eat a meal. It just made me sick. Between the jaundice and the starvation, I was pretty emaciated. And while I was home, I knew I had the Air Medal, 8 Oak Fleet Cluster, Purple Heart, 5 battle stars. I knew I was going to get out on points. So my parents asked me what I was going to do, you know, and I had a year. I was a freshman in college when the war started, when Pearl Harbor happened. So I thought about a lot of things I wanted to do, and I went down to the University of Pittsburgh and enrolled in the School of Pharmacy. My credits would count, so I enrolled as a sophomore. And but while I was ready to start back to school, and going to school, I ate sandwiches. I ate so many sandwiches, my mother used to call me Sandwich Bill. I could handle a sandwich pretty good, but it took about 2 years. While I was there, I went. Got word to go to check in with the VA about having the jaundice. So I went to the VA, and I gave them the name of the ship I was back on, the hospital, and the dates, and never heard from them again. And then I did get a letter saying they didn't have enough information to process my claim. Well, in the interim, I got another letter, and I went down to Meta Board, and I received a direct commission as a second lieutenant then. So I thought, hell, that's better than being a staff sergeant. So then I went ahead and graduated, and then I got recalled, and I was down at Fort Sam, Houston, and I got a letter from the VA saying they were decommissioning some ships, and they found the ship's records that verified my claim. And I was awarded a service-connected disability, but it was 0% because I was better, but I might get sick again. And I wrote a letter back and thanked them, and it was, I never did get jaundice again, but the claim was in, you know, that's when it was my first go around with the VA system.